You're listening to The Art of Imperfect Adulting. I'm your host, Amy Stone. Here, I share stories from real people navigating the adventure that I call adulting. Are you ready? Me too. Let's do this. Well, hello, friends. In today's episode, I'm going to introduce you to my guest, Megan Okonsky, and we talk about moving forward when something that you've dreamed about happening for you and with you falls through. Dreams dashed. You'll hear what Megan's exact situation is in a minute, but one thing that I really love about this story that I think you might find helpful and supportive is that this experience, this dashing of dreams, this happens to pretty much all of us at one point or another. Maybe we dream of being an astronaut that goes to Mars, but we're not selected by the team, or maybe we just want to play Wordle but we can't because the cloud server is down. See what I mean? We have to find our way through. Common experience. All right. Should we do it? Are we ready? Of course we are. Let's go. Megan Okonsky, welcome to the Art of Imperfect Adulting. I'm happy you're here. Are you ready for a fun chat today?
I am so ready. So excited. Thank you for having me.
You are very welcome to be here. I start all of my conversations with the very same question, which is what part of the world do you call home?
I call Austin, Texas home. South Austin to be specific. Yeah, I've lived here for on and off for 10 years.
Very, very cool. Is the weather. So we're recording this at the end of October. Austin, Texas is one of the just hottest places on the planet that I've ever been. I was there for a wedding in September and I thought I
Oh,
would melt. I thought I would melt. All right. So, next warm-up question. What is something about the winter holiday season, which is where this episode will reach everybody? What's something that if you're honest with yourself, you don't love about the winter holiday season?
flying home, both for the prices and for just the, whole process of it. And I'm honest with myself about it, and I am honest with my family about it. So this year we're staying back from Thanksgiving. We're going to do Christmas, and we're going to do our big trip, road trip up from Austin to Pennsylvania and Virginia to see both my family and my wife's family. So I'm excited to be able to drive and avoid the flights. And we've gotten our road trip across the country kind of down to a science. So we're excited.
Austin to Pennsylvania is not a short drive. I mean,
No, it's
Texas is mind-boggling large. After and people who are listening who are from Texas and all, this is like the oversimplification of like the millennium. But so my family, we did a road trip that included crossing Texas
oof.
during lockdown. And I was like, I mean, and it was kind of almost toward the end. So we did thousands and thousands of miles of driving. But driving across Texas was just like specifically West Texas with like which looks like a barren lunar landscape to be, which is
Yep.
wild, just totally wild. Just goes on forever and ever and ever. It's a massive state. So good luck to you guys with that
Yeah.
drive. I think that, travel during busy seasons, people absolutely can resonate with because it can be really inconvenient. And I don't hear anybody singing the praises of air travel these days, especially when you're talking about with a family and luggage and stuff like that.
Yeah, it is. Oh, I could go on and on. We just did a trip to Europe, and our first flight from Austin to New York was delayed, and it was just a mess. And so, yeah, I won't I
Yeah,
won't go too far
everybody, we're
into
all
that.
there. We're all there, right? We're all there. All right. So today we're not going to talk about travel or even holidays. We're going to talk about a decision that you made and you made this decision and this choice because something that you were dreaming of for a long time actually did not work out the way you wanted. And I really think that that's a great topic because while people who are listening will have a different situation, I don't think there's anybody who makes it through life without one of those situations. This thing I want isn't working out, and what am I going to do? Are you ready to talk about this with me?
I'm so ready.
Let's do it. All right, so let's begin with this. You shared with me that during your senior year of college, you had a dream of going into the Peace Corps. So I have a couple of questions about that to set the scene. One of those is how long ago was this?
It was 25 2015 was the year that I graduated. So I had probably started the application process in 2014. It feels like a completely different lifetime ago, even though it was like 10 years ago. But yeah, when I was at college at Temple University, yeah, getting into my senior year, that was the goal.
That was the goal. All right. So tell me a little bit about the dream to go into the Peace Corps. Let's talk about where it came from.
I had gone into college kind of not knowing for sure what I wanted to do. I had thought about being a music teacher. I really wanted to teach music. I had kind of abandoned the dreams of like performing as a job and being a performer. And so but I was very passionate about music, and I really wanted to teach music, and I wanted to do something positive, like make a positive difference in the world. So that was a kind of a dream. And then I did not get into the music education program at Temple, but that is where I ended up going to school. And in the back of my mind, I had some like guidance counselors and some people that were saying, well, if you're thinking about music education or if you're thinking about communications, because that was something I'd been thinking about, I was pushed toward communications. I was pushed toward specifically public relations. And not pushed in an aggressive way, but just kind of guided that way. So I had gone through a full public education or public relations major, strategic communication specifically, and the track was public relations. And I knew that it wasn't exactly for me. There was something just not clicking. There were a lot of writing courses that I really, really enjoyed. And I had a great time at college, and I really wanted to finish the major. I didn't want to switch, but I also wouldn't have known what to switch to. So rather than looking for like a PR job, kind of the stereotypical, or agency or firm, I decided I was going to do something completely different, and I was going to look into the Peace Corps. And I had looked into a program, they have programs for teaching English, they have programs for agriculture, they have programs for, I don't really remember what else. And at the time, for whatever reason, I was like, I'm going to go into the agriculture program.
Okay.
I had done some like, there's a program called Worldwide Opportunities on Organic Farms. And I had done a summer of that, the previous summer. And I was like, that'll be enough to get me in. It, spoiler alert, it was not. But yeah, it just came out of wanting to do something, make a positive difference, do something positive, kind of serve, the country and serve people around the world.
That makes sense. And I can see that if that was your motivation, in that the public relations path may not be a direct line. And I say that not at all in a judgmental way. I have a bunch of kids in my family. We've done the college path a bunch of times. I am the first person to preach that your college degree is not necessarily job training. I
Yeah.
myself studied something that people would think is a hobby, so you have a degree, you studied public relations through a program of strategic communications. I've actually never heard that as a description of a degree, and I think that's brilliant. All right, it's helpful to set the picture. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so if you remember from back then, when you were going through the process, you were finishing your degree, you're going through the process of this. Did you have any concept at that point of what your dream job would have been as an adult? Like, so you'd walked away from the music performing dream, but what at that time would you have said your dream job was?
I don't know if I would have said it because for so long, I mean, since I was like very, very young, since I can remember, if you had given me all the money in the world and said, what do you want to do? I would have said, I want to write books. I want to, be an author. But from very early on, when I was younger, I had it, in my mind that that was not something that you could do for money. And that's not something you could do as a profession. And
Do you know
I had
why?
also,
Do you remember why, where that came from? You may not, but if you do, I'm curious.
I'm not sure exactly where it came from, but even just like when I was searching for college degrees, it was like this joke of, if you're going to be an English major, you're never going to get a job. Like that kind
Oh,
of
yeah, 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 yeah.
idea. The school that I went to was a very, very good public school, and I think they were very, and like in some ways, rightfully so, concerned about their students going to college and getting really good jobs and yeah. So I think that was just the impression I had. I had also, I think when I was younger, I had, I writing requires facing a lot of rejection.
It
And I
does.
think I had faced enough of that rejection early on um, that I was ready. I had kind of pivoted and I was like, all right, I'm not going to touch that again. So yeah, if I think if you had asked me then in the back of my mind, writing was a big part of what I wanted to do. I had a music blog. I had started a music blog at that point, just for fun, just to play around with it. And I ended up getting more opportunities than I thought from it. I had been able to like review products and I had been able to invited to talk on different, roundtables and stuff or write for different blogs. And that was just out of me just having fun and being curious and exploring something that I like to do. But I still in my mind, I wouldn't have admitted it to myself that that's exactly what I wanted to do.
That's a pretty deep-seated disconnect, right? So there's this like, and not in a bad way, right? There's like as we go through our own like self-discovery, there are levels of things that we are not gonna face, the known unknown, right? Like it's the
Hmm.
thing we're not willing to discuss with others or even ourselves for various reasons. But yeah, but there's some fact, and I don't have it at the top of my head, but something like 8 out of 10 adults have a dream of writing a book.
Hmm.
And it is long. It's super interesting because the publishing world has flipped on its head, and it is a long-standing belief that, publishing books is a very, very tough thing to do, and writing a book is not an easy thing to do. Writing a book that anybody wants to read is harder, and writing a book that a lot of people want to read is the big one, which I think is pretty unique. But it has changed a lot. I think that's really interesting. Okay, it's not really. We're off a little off topic. Okay, very good.
It's all
So
good.
you go into applying to the Peace Corps. If I had talked to you at the time that you were going through the application, how confident were you about this process? Were you like, how would you describe your mindset about being accepted into the Peace Corps when you started?
I think I was confident enough to choose the agriculture track. I had a really good friend at the time who she did get into the Peace Corps to teach English, and that's a much wider program. I mean, looking back, I think if I had really wanted to do it, I probably should have applied for that track. Um, and but I was pretty confident because it's a small program. They don't take a lot of people. And I'm sure if you ask, people at college, maybe they had a different impression of what my confidence was, but I must have been some level of it, Like, I
Uh,
went through the whole process.
Yeah, and you were the second person I've talked to on the show about applying to the Peace Corps. And so I have a little bit of background about the fact that the application is no joke. It takes a long time. There's a lot of different components. So would you be comfortable sharing with us what was it that happened that dashed these dreams of you going off to farm for the Peace Corps?
I just didn't get it. And I remember the night that I didn't get in. Like I just wasn't
You just
accepted
you
to.
just did not get an acceptance note. You just did
Yeah,
like so.
not at all. And I remember that night just asking myself, well, what the heck am I going to do now? It was, I believe, January or February. I was doing my last semester at school. I had gotten this rejection, and I think anytime someone had asked me what I was doing, that was the plan.
Yeah.
So I just had this like completely open, unknown future ahead. And I just remember being very distraught by it. And, just rejection in general is no fun. I've gotten used to it now as I've, spoiler alert, pursued more writing. But I, yeah, I was absolutely distraught. And I didn't know what was ahead. And that was terrifying. And I didn't know where I even wanted to look for things.
Yeah.
So,
And
yeah.
the application process is about a year. So you had been, or not quite that long.
I can't even remember,
Okay.
honestly. I remember it took a while, and part of the reason that I had spent this entire summer, working on farms was just to get, some sort
Yeah.
of experience that I was doing. So I clearly had been thinking about it for quite a long time. But yeah, I don't exactly remember how much went into it. I'm sure I got some letters of recommendation, and I was really connected with like the honors program at Temple. So yeah, it was not a fun thing to get rejected
So
from.
it's a really tough time in any young adult's life, this season of graduation. And so, there's a couple times people can go through it, right? You go through it in high school, if even if you're going to college. But then when you graduate from college and you are supposed to like really launch like into adulthood, it's a famously like it's supposed to be this like wonderful when Harry met Sally like romantic moment of your life, but a lot of people in my experience of being around young people, it's a really tough time because it's really the first time that there's not unless you're going to grad school, in which case the admissions department lines up and says here's your next form, where you're in control and you're like this is what I'm going to do and here is the choice. And panic attacks, and it's combined with which you talk about. There's still a lot of adults in your life asking you, hey, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Like, hey, how are you? What are you going to do? Where are you going to go? And so you had a plan and the plan didn't work out. And you talk about saying, I have absolutely no idea what I'm going to do now. Okay. So, um, I want to back up a little bit and ask you about like your support structure, which you can tell us as little or as much as you want to. But I talked about a little bit that you're like jumping. This is where you jump away from your family in
Yes.
most times. Tell us a little bit about your how much support you had at this point from your family. Do you come from a big family with lots of brothers and sisters? Were your parents like supportive of the Peace Corps? Like what was going on from that side in your family at this time?
Yeah, I have I have a brother and I have a sister, both younger than me. I
So you had no examples of how to manage this from
No.
the family.
No, and yeah, and my parents, I think both of them, they were like first generation college. I'm pretty confirmed on that. Um, and my mom had been kind of given two options for what she wanted to do in college. She also wanted to go into music education, and she was told business or computer science, and that's the only degrees that we're willing to pay for. So she kind of had a similar experience, although she wasn't as rigid as her parents were. And because she had that experience, she was very supportive of pretty much anything. I mean, both of them were very supportive of anything I wanted to do. They were, but I mean, and they still are very supportive. They were very good at encouraging me and saying that I could do anything I wanted. My dad really wanted me to be a lawyer. I'm not very detail oriented, so I knew in my mind that that was not the path for me. But he saw my love for writing, and he's like, "Oh, you can be a lawyer," you know. So that's kind of maybe why I didn't necessarily go the fiction route, but I understand where he was coming from.
Yeah.
So yeah, they were both very supportive. I called my dad the night that I didn't get in and just cried to him and just asked, what am I gonna do? And I mean, he was very reassuring. He's like, "You're gonna figure it out. You can do so many things." He just reassured me that it was okay that I got rejected from this. So their support was just so crucial in kind of what I ended up just doing next.
Yeah,
So
and that's the reason I brought up the family and the support because you told me in the application that what you actually do next is not jump into, well, maybe you did look for some jobs, but you decide to go and do some traveling. And I'm curious like, walk us through like how you made that decision, and how that became a thing. Did it start as like a graduation trip? Like what happened there?
I I think because I had nothing ahead, and I was at this point, it was, January, February, a lot of my peers had jobs, especially in public relations, or they knew what they were going to do. Um, I, I was so lost, and I was like, well, what's my options? And I think I can't remember where I got this idea. Um, but maybe it was through the music blogging. I had seen some travel blogs, or maybe I, I had never studied abroad, but I'd always tried to study abroad and it just never worked out. But I had always wanted to spend some time not in the US. I had done, one or two trips here and there when I was younger, but I had never done these like, nothing like what I ended up doing. Um, and I just started seeing things online of people who were backpacking for in Europe, and how I looked for flights from New York to London, and they had this website. It's like Student Universe. It still exists, and you got flight deals. I don't know how technically good they are, but my flight from New York to London, I think, was like $300 one way. And I'd been working for myself for and paying my way through college for like the past 2 years. So I had a little bit of money saved up, enough to pay for the flight. And I said, well, you know what? I'm just going to go. I'm going to go on this adventure. I don't know how long I'm going to go for. I don't know, when I'm going to fly back. I was still applying for jobs. I ended up getting a position in the AmeriCorps, kind of the American version
Yep.
of the Peace Corps in Austin, because I also had this idea of moving to Austin. I love the city. I have an uncle here who I had visited him, and, just fell in love with Austin. So I was like, okay, so it'll be around maybe 3 months. I don't know. And I just went for it, because what else was I gonna do in that time?
Megan, that's so interesting. All right, so you had been Austin is a very music oriented city. UT has a lot of music programs,
Mhm.
and I was in Austin in the '90s, and then in 2023 was the last time I was in Austin for that wedding. Wow, it has changed. I will tell you that. Okay,
Yes.
but you were living in New York. You had been supporting yourself financially already, which or paying for school, working at the end.
Yeah, so Temple's in Philadelphia, which is cheaper than New York. And but the flight was just out of New York was kind of easy to get to. Um, yeah, so kind of 2 years in, my parents were like, all right, you're gonna figure out how this all works for yourself now. Which I'm very happy they did, because I was able to navigate loans, and I really liked being financially independent. I'd spent a semester in Florida doing the Disney College program, and I'd been completely, as I had such a cheap apartment, and I wasn't getting paid much, but paid enough to be financially independent, and I loved it. I wish maybe held on a little bit longer, but I loved it. Yeah. So for 2 years, I working and saving up money, and yeah, paying my way through things. So I I didn't do too much research on how much it would be to spend 3 months in Europe just backpacking, but I was very frugal with it, and I thought I had enough. So yeah, it was good.
There you go. So you decide you've got your own money in your pocket. And the only reason I ask is
Mhm.
because whenever we talk about travel, right, like people mostly jump to the concept of like luxury resort type travel.
Yes.
And when we're talking about somebody who's in their early 20s, there's always a question of, oh, are you attached to like an unlimited bank account like that allows you to do this? And so that's where that question was coming from. Because even when I talk to adults who take a year off, a gap year, a sabbatical. People are legitimately curious and rightfully so, like, oh, how do you do that? Like, how does this
Yeah.
happen? And so that's very interesting. And so, but you had some money in your pocket and you're pretty sure you could do this. You take off to London. You're by yourself.
Yes.
Your plan is just to gallivant around and explore Europe. You backpack. How much luggage did you take?
I had just one backpack that I bought from REI. I still use it to this day. It's like an Osprey. I think it's 55 liters.
That's a big bag.
Um, yeah, yeah. So it was
That's a
a big,
big bag.
it was big. It was enough for, I think I had even brought heels with me when I did that trip. When I've done since backpacking trips since I've pared down my shoes. I'm a very light packer. still to the, I don't know if it's because of that or, I just always have been. But yeah, I just took that one backpack and yeah, I was ready to go.
Oh
It
my
was in the
goodness. All
summer
right.
too, which helped.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I did a backpacking trip as a student program in my 20s. And I'm
Oh, fun.
currently traveling. The 50-year-old backpack, for anybody listening, has wheels on it, also from REI. But that I can still pick it up. And, I did learn how to pack lightly and not take heels. As a virtue of carrying everything I owned for 9 months. But you end up traveling for 2 years.
Hmm.
All right, so let's talk about that. That's amazing, but I'm curious how it went from summer trip with a backpack to 2 years. So did you meet some people along the way? Did you make a plan? Did you stay by yourself the whole time? Like, let's talk about that.
So the 2 years actually ended up like after the initial 3 months. But it just turned into a whole big kind of early 20s of traveling. So I was
So did you come
abroad for,
home after 3 months
I
and then go
did,
back?
I
Okay,
did.
so after 3 months you
Yeah.
come back and reset, and then you go for 2 years. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So in the 3 months, I met a lot of people through couch surfing, which is how I could afford
Okay.
a lot of the trip. I think I couch surfed maybe half of the time that I was there.
And were
Um,
you using like a couch surfing like connection thing? So it was like an app or a website that was like come sleep on our couch.
Yeah, and so it's changed since because now I think you have to pay for the website, which is like against the entire kind of concept of how the website started. But I'm sure it has to do with safety and stuff like that. I would sign up. I just made a profile. I asked people along the way, hey, I'm going to be in Liverpool or I'm going to be in Vienna or I'm going to be in Berlin. Do you have a couch for me? And along the way, actually, the first person I stayed with in Liverpool was like a young guy, like same age, we were both in our early 20s, got along. We ended up like going to Dublin like later in the trip, just because I think he had wanted to visit. And I was like, well, I'm going to go. So we stayed in touch after that trip. And I had fully gotten the travel bug. I was so like interested in the way that people could travel long term because when you especially in hostels and backpacking when meeting all these young people they're on gap years or they're doing this long term. I had a friend who was traveling the world for 4 years, and so I was completely hooked on it. And I had been in touch with this friend from couchsurfing. He had told me that he was moving to Australia because the minimum wage there is like $20 an hour. And I was, back in the States, had come back to start, working. And I was, AmeriCorps does not pay very much.
No.
And then I was working in retail. I'd gotten a copywriting job and they paid a little bit more, but not that much, certainly not $20 an hour. So he had told me about that. And I said, well, I'm in. I'm going to Australia next. And but before Australia, I had a good friend of mine who I'd been roommates with in college. And a lot of people from Australia, they will backpack in Southeast Asia. I had
Yes.
a friend I met through couch surfing, a different friend who had just come back from a trip to Southeast Asia. And she was like, you have to go. It's amazing. You can ride your motorbike up Vietnam. And I was like, I'm in. So my college roommate and I, we decided we were going to do 6 weeks while he's a teacher. And so during his summer break, we were going to do 6 weeks in Southeast Asia. I stayed another 6 weeks. I applied for a visa to work for a year in Australia. So after Southeast Asia, I moved to Australia for a year. Part of that year is I lived in a van in New Zealand with a friend that I had met in Southeast Asia. And we just, took our van up and down New Zealand. And then, yeah, for that kind of took me up to maybe a year and a half. I was home kind of briefly for like the holidays, and then spent another, like the last part of that 2 years in South America, because I'd had some friends who were wanting to go to South America. then they kind of backed out of it. But I had already told my parents I was going to South America, and they were okay with the idea of me gallivanting through South America for 3 months. I was like, I'm not going to let this go to waste. I'm going to go to South America for 3 months. And by the end of that full 2 years, that's when I was like, all right, I think I'm good to kind of settle in a little bit and settle down. So yeah, but it was a whirlwind, and it all started because I had no idea what I was going to do with my life, you
Right.
know?
Okay. So you don't get the Peace Corps gig. You decide to go travel. You do 3 months in Europe, where you learn about couch surfing,
Mhm.
and then you come back. You reset. And if I put this together, right, there are some components that really made this possible. One, you were young.
Yeah.
You were not tied down with like big expenses, and you did have, and this is worth noting, you had the support of. It sounds like your parents had a home base, so like you could like
Yeah.
throw your bags there and if you needed to come back, you didn't have to find a place to settle in the States. You could come back and crash in
Yeah.
the basement. And then it sounds like you were picking up some jobs along the way.
Yes.
And that all helped it come together for 2 years of travel. So, and you were making friends the way one does in their 20s, with
Yeah.
people who are in similar situations of doing these things. All right, so we're going to talk about what you do next. I want to ask you like a very sort of obnoxious grown-up kind of question, right? But like when you were doing, like when you were coming back and you were thinking about settling down and, putting together your resume, your LinkedIn profile, what was on it for this 2 years of like travel? Because there is still, rightly or wrong, there is still this sense that if we have a gap in our resume,
Hmm.
the resume detectives are going to be like, "Where were you on April
Yeah.
5th?" So were you like racking stuff up that you were like, "This is the work experience I was doing during this time," or was it just how did you handle that?
Yeah. So I was very lucky in that I am very lucky in that I did come around to pursuing writing as a full-time job. It started in 2016 as a copywriter. So I was writing blog posts, I was writing social media content, I was writing all these ebooks, different things. And I had that experience while I kind of was resetting before I went abroad again. And then when I was in Malaysia in Southeast Asia, when my friend had went back to the States, I was working in a hostel, and that was one of the ways I was kind of saving money. And then I had some free time on my hands, and there was this freelancing platform called Upwork, which still
Yep,
exists.
still around.
Yeah, still around. And I had made a profile, and because I had this copywriting experience, and I was like, well, let me look for some jobs. And it was perfect timing because at the time, the jobs that I could have gotten with kind of the little experience that I had, they were the ones that were like $12 an hour, $15 an hour, not a ton of money, but I was living in Malaysia and it was,
Yeah,
$15 an hour there is $60 an hour, really. And I was like, I'm living good with 2 hours of work or 3 hours of work a day. So I started working that way and I really enjoyed it. And I had some regular gigs that way. I was writing video scripts. I was writing, I was doing a lot of stuff that allowed me to fund my travels. I did some retail work here and there when I lived in Australia. But other than that, I was mainly just writing. And so when I got back to the States, it kind of was like I had never been gone. I mean, it was weird
okay.
that, yeah, I had like an internship that I did in Australia. You could see that I had done work abroad. I don't know if I would have put the hostels on my resume, but I mean, I had the Upwork profile that I still have now. And so I was able to kind of fill in that gap with the writing I was doing. And I wasn't working 40 hours a week because I didn't need to. And I would, talk to someone in a hostel 2 hours into working and then shut my laptop and say, well, I'm going to go hang out with this guy, like, so I wasn't working full time, but I at least had enough kind of it's experience under my belt that it wasn't a crazy just nothing gap.
Yeah, and I think that I mean, first of all, there's some hustle there. You were hustling,
Hmm.
and you were racking up credits, where you
Hmm.
could fill in the gaps where it was like I was working for this person at this time. So, and I think that that's helpful, right? I do think that's helpful, and you were living in a way where, and this is this amazing thing about this young time in our life, right? Like, so youngsters always get slammed by older generations, which I think is really, really, a terrible thing because like it's not accurate or true in my experience in almost every situation. And but it's like when you're in your 20s, your cost of living can be so low that it just gives you this like great freedom to have this wonderful life with very little expense. And then they call it income creep and lifestyle creep, which is that your life becomes more expensive. And then somebody's like, "Hey, do you want this wackadoodle job for 4 cents an hour?" And you're like, "I cannot. It is not possible for me to make my car payment, and also I need health insurance."
Yeah.
So and that's the grind of aging, to be honest. All right, so you were making a combination of like touristing, living as an expat, and working abroad, and that's what made this work. Okay, what brings you home?
I decided after 2 years that I didn't want to do all of this alone
Okay,
anymore.
yeah,
I still had plans to travel again. I moved back to Austin because I just wanted a community. I was ready to have a solid community, a solid group of friends, a solid group of people that I could, or a partner that I could travel with and make these memories with. And I on the first date I had with my wife, I had told her about a trip that I wanted to do, to like a road trip that I wanted to do. I've been planning. This was in 2019 when I came back. I've been planning to do this big trip to Mongolia because it's still my dream trip is to go to Mongolia, and my wife and I are planning this for in like 2 or 3 years. I'm gonna finally do it. But it was like the big trip I wanted to do at the time, and then COVID happened, so it just dashed
okay.
anything, any dreams of that. But I still wanted to travel, but I wanted to do it in a more balanced way where it wasn't my whole lifestyle of just living from hostel to hostel and seeing people for maybe a week at a time and then never seeing them again, or maybe seeing them on Instagram. But yeah, I wanted a community. I wanted people to share the memories with, because there are certain memories that I have that I can't go back to the people that I either made them with or I made them by myself, and I can't like reminisce on those things. And I want to be able to share that. So I'm happy that I can do that,
That's a
now.
really interesting thing. And when I talk to people about traveling, specifically solo traveling, I am talking to them about
Hmm.
the reality of camaraderie and community, because we are alive in a really crazy time where you can have a parasocial community that follows you wherever you go. You and I
Yeah.
aren't in the same space. But there's also when you're traveling, there's the mental effort of like figuring out what you're going to do and where you're going to put your head at night, which people do talk about. And then there's the reality of doing it as a single or finding a partner along the way. I want to ask you a question about the solo part of the travel because, and this is inspired by the fact that anytime I tell people I'm doing something by myself, one of the very first comments I get is about safety. And they're like,
Mm.
like, I don't know if I'd feel safe or I'd be scared. And that is, and I don't, the way I handle that conversation for everybody in my real life who listens to the show is I just sort of I'm just sort of evasive. Like I don't engage
Yeah.
on that kind of conversation. But if you're comfortable with it, talk a little bit about whether or not that was on the top of your mind, or how much of it you experienced, like because you were alone. Were you? 'Cause I just don't know. I don't. It doesn't usually. And there's other than the flash moment where you look around, you're like, nobody knows I'm here, and I'm.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I wasn't too worried about, I mean, I was worried about it in the way that I feel like I planned a few steps ahead, where like when I was, especially with couch surfing, when I
Yeah.
would choose people who I was couch surfing with, I was more likely to choose a younger person who, usually a younger woman, although I say with like some men, because a lot of men host the couch surfing. I would there were certain ways I would ask them questions, and we'd have a conversation ahead of time, and I would make sure that they were like legit. There was one guy who reached out to me on couchsurfing because I had listed I was going to a certain music festival, and he was like, "Hey, I live on the farm where this music festival is being held. Do you want to stay at my house for this music festival instead of having the camp?" And I remember like looking on his Instagram, looking on his Facebook, like looking, like just making sure he was who he said he was. And
Yes.
because I was like, that's kind of a, that seems too good to be true. But it was true and it was great. It was a fantastic experience. Um, and so there was certain things I would try and plan for and just make sure that I was with like people. If there was any sort of vibe that I did not like, I tried to, always have an escape route, stuff like that. But like with hostels and stuff, that was something I know a lot of people in my life were worried about. But I'm like, it's like a business. Like
Yeah.
it is a legit business in a city where millions of people live. If something wrong happens, then I have a plan to get out of it. I did have actually all of my most important stuff stolen in Berlin, because I was being an idiot. And that was kind of just by the grace of the universe that I was able to kind of keep moving forward on my trip the way that I did. So I'll tell you this story. I was in Berlin. I had been couch surfing, but I moved to a hostel just because I was ready to kind of have my own space and not be, staying in someone's house and kind of whatever. So, but the day before, I had gone out with the people, the couch surfing people, and I had my passport with me. And this woman said, "Why are you carrying your passport with you? Like, you don't really need it. You're over 18. You don't need to show your ID anywhere." So I said, that's right." So I'd put my passport in my backpack that night, right before I was about to go out, meet some people for drinks. And I had a lock for my backpack and I kind of kept everything, and I didn't have any valuables with me. But I put my passport away. I had some Polish cash because I was going to Poland and someone had traded me, euros for Polish cash or whatever. And I went out. I had my day bag with me that had a phone, that had my like driver's license, that had, all my day stuff. I had like a hairbrush and I was really sad that I had gotten that stolen. And I had it kind of by my side. This was like, 1 a.m. I'm out for drinks with people. And I look down and it's gone. And normally
Oh,
I'd have my bag
yeah.
with me and I had so it was just like the one kind of moment where I had kind of let
But
it
your
loose.
passport was in your backpack, so you were not stopped. Oh, that is really lucky. That is, I mean, and they tell you that, right? Like it's like this weird combination of things when you're traveling and you're moving around. It's
Yeah.
like it's two pieces of advice that people give you when you're traveling that are exact opposites, and you're supposed to follow them both
Yeah.
and not ever give a question. It's like one, carry your passport with you at all times in case you are asked for it, and two, keep it safe and, always have a backup. It's like, hello, these rules were written by somebody who has not actually tried to
Right.
apply them, because you cannot do those things. That is, I mean, that is definitely that highlights actually one of the unique pressures of solo traveling. And this is the same whether you're in your own hometown and you're just by
Oh yeah.
yourself. Like it's like when you are by yourself, whether you're driving to the grocery store or whether you're like gallivanting around, it's like, oh, if I lose these keys to the house, like there is not another person with a backup. There's not an RA, there's not an organization, like, and that pressure is
Yep.
like a low level thing. So, but I appreciate you talking about that because it's something that I am going to think about more and talk to people more about in the future. But I think we feed young girls a lifetime of messaging that they are only safe if they have somebody looking out for them. And I think that's a big thing to get over if you're going to do things. But you do shut down a whole world of opportunity if you're like, oh, I'll only do this if there's a guardian.
Yeah.
Because,
I don't,
like you said, there are all these organizations like hostels, hotels, all of those things.
yeah. And there's everywhere you go, there are people who are just going about their day,
Yes.
everyday life. Like not everyone's, I'm trying to put this in a way that's not too harsh, but it's like not everyone's looking at you and trying to get, I don't know.
And at the same
I
time, there are always, and this is not just travelers, but there are always people who are opportunistic looking for bags to pickpocket and stuff like that. So you were in Berlin. Did you go to that like famous nightclub that everybody talks about?
No, probably because it costs too much, I
Oh,
think. Like,
is
and
it
I
expensive?
probably,
I'm like much too old to do this, but all of my young kids, when they all know about it. None of us have managed it, but it's on like I think it's on the, if you like clubbing, which I was never a
yeah.
clubber, it's on the list of lifetime things to do because it's a really big deal to get in, I think.
I think I had talked about it with the couch surfers I was hanging out with, but like they were like they had no reason to go. And I
Yeah.
was like, that I'm not gonna do by myself. Like I would rather go with people to that. Yeah, so there were certain things that like I wouldn't have done by myself. And yeah, something like that I probably would have avoided. And it was also just like, so what I'm gonna just like I guess you could dance by yourself. You could totally do
It
that,
is
but
no, but
yeah.
there are things that are like, so one of the things I did was traveling through so like, this is my joke that is
Ooh.
not fully formulated, but it's like, it's like the holiday meal by yourself, like the Thanksgiving meal at Denny's by yourself is notably regarded as like a sad thing that shows up in movies, right? But I did a wine tasting by myself because I was in wine country. And I was like, okay, I will do this. And afterwards, I was like, okay, like just for the record, like wine tasting, I should have signed up for a tour because
Yeah.
I was like, there's no one for me to talk to about
Yeah, you're
these
like,
things.
ooh, BlackBerry.
Right. I
Okay.
was like,
All right.
exactly, exactly. And because I could talk to anybody about anything, I like totally chatted up the guy that was like doing the tasting and it was fine. But afterwards, I was like, okay, there are some things where you want to find a little. All right. So
Yeah.
very good. So in a second, we're going to do the final fun questions. But you've talked a little bit about this. You were already writing, you picked up freelance work while you were away. Tell us what you do today as a career, a profession, a business. Give us a shout out for what you do these days.
Yeah. So I am a full-time ghostwriter. I write business books and memoirs. I have, been picking that up since, I think 2019 is really when I expanded from, the kind of short form content that I was doing into manuscripts I've written for over, I want to say 2 dozen, it's probably close to 20 entrepreneurs, founders, executives, everyday heroes. And I absolutely love what I do. I kind of joke that I get a free business course with every book because I work a lot with like, sales coaches or, just executives who want to share their wisdom with either their family or the world. I've written memoirs of really interesting people. And yeah, I just really love what I do. I love being able to uh, take a person's life story and take all of the interesting things they've learned and kind of organize it into a full length book. Because I think sometimes people don't always realize how much they have to share with the world and being able to kind of put it all in a way that they read it back and they're like, oh, I've got a lot to say. It's a really rewarding job
So,
and I love it.
let's touch base on in case there's somebody who's listening who doesn't know
Yeah.
what ghostwriting is. So you're writing memoirs and business books, nonfiction
Yeah.
business books, which is like, how to become a millionaire in 70s and
Yeah.
steps. Yeah, 7 easy steps.
Yeah.
No, but very, like that would include really well-known books. Probably the best known book right now that's on that sort of theme is Mel Robbins' Let Them Theory book. Is a
Yeah.
business
Yep.
book. Yeah. So
Yeah.
talk about what a ghostwriter is so that everybody knows.
Yeah, so my clients come to me usually with like a framework that they've developed for their clients, or they come to me just wanting to share their life story. So what I do is I kind of put together like an outline of the book with them, with their core message, kind of what they want to share with their audience, who they want their audience to be. I kind of outline all of that for them. And then I get to know them through, like 12 to 15 like hour long interviews. We'll talk, just about the content of the book and I really just get to know them and get to know their voice and get to know why they have this message and kind of what experiences have fueled that. And then I write the book for them. I draft a, entire manuscript for them. They sometimes will be checking chapters along the way, or sometimes they just get the full manuscript. And yeah, and they take that and they take it either to, like they self-publish it. There's some self-publishing services that are out there, hybrid publishers, or they pitch it to a traditional publisher. So I kind of guide them through which publishing route is best for them and for their goals. Some people want to use it as like the best business card ever, and
Yeah.
they'll go on a speaking tour and they'll, sell the book afterward, or they'll give it out for free just so that they can, introduce themselves to clients. Or some people just want to like have it for themselves and for their family to like pass down, just to get their story out to people. So I kind of help them with which route is going to be the best path for them and their book and their overall goals for the book.
And the reason we call it a ghostwriter for people who are listening is that the book is released with the name of the person,
Yes.
right? So like,
Yes.
so it's like, this is by me, but behind the scenes, silent as a ghost, Megan is writing it. Okay, so for people who want to reach out to you and find out more about what you do and how you do it, your website is your name,
Yes.
meganokonsky.com. That will be in the show description if you're watching this on YouTube, or the show notes if you're watching it listening to it on a podcast player. But the easiest way to get the links for these is always to be a subscriber to the Imperfect Adulting email community, because then you get the recap. Once a week, I send out a newsletter with all of the episodes that are released, including all of the links, and then you just click on them. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. All right. Are you ready, Megan, for the final fun questions?
Yes.
All right, let's do it. All right. If I invited you over for dinner and wanted to make you your favorite meal, what would you want me to make for you?
Ooh.
I love asking adults this, because if you ask a 5-year-old, they would know right away. Maybe not 5, but if you ask a 10-year-old, they're like, this is it. But you ask an adult, they're like, ooh, what is my favorite?
I mean, my answer is a 5-year-old's answer. I love a good mac and cheese. If you can make a good mac and cheese, then it's
Yeah.
delicious.
A good mac and cheese is really great. And the key to good mac and cheese, in my opinion, is more cheese. And then when you think that you've
Hmm.
got enough cheese, it's actually still more cheese.
Yes.
So, all right. I love to ask an author this question. Do you read or listen to books? And if you do, would you be willing to share the last thing that you read or listened to?
Yes. I just finished a book called Play Nice by Rachel Harrison. I Well, I'm a huge fan of hers. I think this is her sixth book, I believe. And at least the past 3 years, they've come out around spooky season.
Okay.
And they all are kind of like horror books, but it's usually like a female protagonist who's like a little sassy. So Play Nice is about a woman who inherits a haunted house from her
Oh.
mother, and she goes to try and renovate it and fix it up, and is faced with the demons of the house, the demons of, personal demons. It's my favorite book by her. I read most of her books. It's just really, really well done, and I really, really, really enjoyed it. It was like a quick read, but it was still just like a thought-provoking read.
Love that. What a good recommendation. Thank you very much. All right, last one. What is something that you have purchased for yourself recently that's made your life noticeably better? Don't take this question too seriously. It doesn't have to be like a work-related thing or something like that. But what's something you bought for yourself that
Hmm.
you've been like, oh, that was helpful?
Hmm. Oh, I bought good running shoes, which were fantastic. They were Hoka
People love Hocus, yeah.
running shoes. Oh my gosh, they're amazing. And I had gotten some, I think maybe not this June, but the previous June. I have been training for the Houston Marathon, which is in
Ah,
January,
yep.
and these new Hokas they were fantastic, and they accompanied me on my trip to Europe that I just did. I did like 2.5 weeks with my wife and her cousin, so it was good to break them in that way. And then I did like a long run yesterday with them, and it was I'm very happy I had them. They make my life
Very good. Will
easier.
this be your first marathon?
Yes, first and only. I hate
I'll call you in a couple of years and follow up on that.
that's that's okay with us too.
Exactly. No, I mean, some people do one and so it does happen, but other people are finished and like, that was terrible. And 3 days later, like, when is the next one?
That's the problem. Yeah, I did a half marathon. I said that was all I was going to do, and I had a terrible time. And I said I know I can do better. And the Houston Marathon is completely flat, so I was like,
Yeah.
might as well.
I hope you
So we'll
get
see.
I hope you get good weather. I hope you have a wonderful day. Those were fantastic answers. That's it. Megan Okonsky, thank you so much for being a fantastic guest today on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really had fun. So.
Thank you for listening today. I hope that you enjoy the show. And before I go, I want to encourage you to become a bigger part of the conversation. Obviously, subscribe wherever you're listening to the show. Listen to more episodes. That'd be great. Obvi again, please write a review and tell your friends about the show. That truly is a great help for getting the show in front of new people. Okay, but more fun for you yourself, head over to imperfectadulting.com and join the email community. You'll get some free stuff right away, and that way you'll begin to get the emails about the podcast. This includes the links for the special offers from the guests, and it's the only way to get that. Also, if you aren't in the mood to listen, I actually include an article directly in those emails. Whee! Now, if you love this and you crave more time with me, Amy, as a coach, a mentor, or just adultier adult, numero uno, check out The Village. If you have a story you want to share with the listeners, I'd love to hear from you. I have an open application. Just let me know you want it. And that's a wrap for today. Until next time, remember, the journey is the destination. Ralph Waldo Emerson said that, not me. Well, until just now, I did just say it. But what I want you to hear today is that if your adulting journey isn't going the way you expected, that may not mean that you're lost. It may just mean that you're on your way. This is Amy Stone, signing off. The Imperfect Adulting podcast is created and produced by Amy Stone and Amy Says So. Anything expressed on this show is offered as entertainment, and the views of the guests may not always represent the ideas and viewpoints of the host. That's me. Amy does not intend or hold herself out to provide professional advice or recommendations of any kind. In the end, you and you alone need to make those kinds of decisions based on your personal and individual situation, needs, circumstances, and comfort level.